Okay, so Netanyahu has arrived now in the United States, and he's brought hostages with him. We have, you can see all of these various different. He's shown up with several hostages that he's speaking. Really, they're just a PR stunt, right? Is what they're here. I'm sorry, guys. Let me just get my stuff right in front of me. One of the hostages he's brought with him is Noah Argamani. She is one of the most famous, I would say, or infamous, I don't know how you would frame that, hostages from October 7th. I just want to read from this tear sheet from you, from this Times of Israel. It's really interesting. These hostages that have arrived with Netanyahu have caused quite a controversy, and not with the woke, college, anti-Semitic, Marxist kids, that everybody's kind of pointing at. But this is the trip for these hostages coming to the United States with Netanyahu has caused controversy inside of Israel, and in particularly amongst the families of hostages and the other hostages who have been released. They think that the hostages who have come with Netanyahu here to the United States should not have. They are angry with Netanyahu. They don't want him legitimized. They want him gone. They believe that he is the reason that they are remaining, their family members, their loved ones are still in captivity. And in fact, Noah Argamani even said to Netanyahu that the hardest moment, she says, quote, "The hardest moment I had in captivity was when I listened to the radio and heard you say the war will be long. I thought, I won't get out of here. And it was a breaking point for me," she told Netanyahu right to his face. So these hostages are not thrilled with Netanyahu, but many of them, some of them, a handful of them have decided, and their family members have decided to come along with Netanyahu here to the United States. Let me just read the rest of this story for you from the Times of Israel, because it really does kind of encapsulate the problem that these hostages are having with Netanyahu. But it says that let me just get to this part here in this meeting. The meeting was also attended by relatives of hostages who traveled separately to Washington. So Netanyahu traveled with some, and then there were others that came to Washington without Netanyahu. And they said that they also attended the meeting. And they said that they were there to demonstrate against Netanyahu and to urge him to immediately sign a deal with Hamas to free the hostages. Netanyahu told the meeting that the conditions for a deal for their loved ones' release was ripening without a doubt. But it's not there yet, is what he's saying to them. The reports on Argamani's comments came as she and her father faced virulent criticism for agreeing to accompany Netanyahu on his visit to the U.S., leading to condemnations by both coalition and opposition lawmakers. Family members of other hostages held by Hamas had urged the Argamanis not to go, claiming this would bolster Netanyahu, who many blame for failing to secure a deal to free the remaining 120 hostages after more than 9 months of war. Many relatives of hostages have been waging a months-long protest campaign against the Netanyahu government. The government's failure to strike a deal with Hamas since 105 were freed in the week-long November deal, while a minority of families have been calling on him to escalate military pressure as a means of coercing Hamas into softening its negotiation stance. So there you have it. There are more families who want a deal. They want a hostage exchange deal. There's a minority of families who want him to escalate the military conflict, escalate the war in order to gain these hostages back. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so Argamani, who was rescued by Israeli forces last month alongside 3 other hostages, is set to join Netanyahu with her father and other hostage family members for the prime minister's address Wednesday to a joint session of Congress. In a post on Monday, left-wing Haaretz pundit Uri Mizgov, a vehement critic of Netanyahu, said that Argamani and her father should be ashamed of agreeing to serve as a decor for Netanyahu on the same day that the IDF announced the deaths in Hamas captivity of hostages Alex Dancing and Yegev Bushatov. In response, Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Chikli for the ruling Likud party tweeted that Argamani spent hundreds of days in captivity and has just lost her mother, and noted that her partner, Avintan Or, is still being held in Gaza. He called Mizgov a bottomless pit of gratuitous malice. So there's a lot of dissent inside of Israeli society. There's actually a lot of, I would say, arguing inside of the Israeli society. So here in the United States, if you speak up against what's going on with Israel, if you speak up against Netanyahu, you're called an anti-Semite. and we're told to shut up and just support Israel no matter what. Otherwise, we're a bunch of Jew haters. But in the land of Jews, they're allowed, they are arguing with each other. And that obviously, that slur doesn't land over there when there's an entire group of Jewish people who are at odds with one another about this war, about the hostages, about what's going on. They're allowed in Israel, I would say, a much more robust debate about what has gone on since October 7th than even what we're allowed here in the United States. So they have a more free society, I would say, in their ability to dissent about the war, dissent about Netanyahu. They're enjoying a much more robust debate than we're allowed to here. So you got all these hostages, right? They're here with Netanyahu. He's brought them with him, as if they're his hostages almost, because he wants to basically pressure the United States into giving Israel more, because he wants to, he wants us to give Israel more, and he wants to play kind of the strings of sadness and showing us the hostage families. So he's here to speak at a joint session of Congress on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. There are several lawmakers who are not going to be attending. Vice President Kamala Harris is traveling, and she declined to preside. She's supposed to be presiding over this. But next in line is the Senate pro temp. Patty Murray is also declining to preside. That is leaving the joint session of Congress to be led by the Senate Foreign Relations Chair Ben Cardin, who is going to sit next to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, during this joint session. And so Cardin is kind of taking the reins for these other Senate leaders, these other Democratic Senate leaders that are refusing to attend. There's others, the squad is not going to be going. Rashida Tlaib says that Netanyahu, she's the only Palestinian American member of Congress, by the way. She says Netanyahu is a war criminal committing genocide against the Palestinian people. It is utterly disgraceful that leaders from both parties have invited him to address Congress. He should be arrested and sent to the International Criminal Court. Ilhan Omar is not going to be attending. She's apparently given her ticket to one of the family members of a hostage that is still a hostage in Gaza. Again, these family members are against Netanyahu. They think that he's politically motivated. He is not interested in their family members. He's using them. His response to them is, look, Israel's in a crisis right now. We got to do what's best for Israel. And if that means your family, basically he's saying, if that means your family member dies as collateral damage, then that's what happens. And these family members are obviously very upset about that. So they're here to protest him, a lot of these hostage family members. And I think that's important to know and to make clear as he parades around his hostages as a PR stunt. It's important to know that there are even more hostages here in the United States right now protesting Netanyahu, showing up to that joint session of Congress just to protest him. They are not in favor of him. Protests, speaking of protests, lots of protests are now going on with Netanyahu set to speak to the joint session of Congress tomorrow. Today, there was a big session, a big protest that happened inside of the Capitol. You can see there, this is Jewish Voices for Peace. So this is a bunch of Jewish Americans there protesting, and they ended up getting a bunch of them got arrested. I mean, they got them out of there. They're saying, stop arming Israel. Jews say, stop arming Israel. And many of these Jews were arrested and kicked out for peacefully protesting. By the way, Chuck Schumer made a statement today about protests that are happening in Bangladesh. And he was saying, it's alarming because in Bangladesh started to crack down on their protesters and arrest them. And he's saying, it's really alarming that they are, we believe in democracy and people's right to protest. And it's really alarming that Bangladesh is arresting people. And it's like, okay, we're getting arrests here on college campuses, at our own Capitol building. They're arresting people. And okay, but let's talk about Bangladesh, right? So there's a lot of protests that are going to be taking place tomorrow. There's possibilities for you, if you're in the region, to also join in. Here's Answer Coalition. Answer Coalition, arrest Netanyahu. They are surrounding Congress tomorrow, July 24th, with the People's Red Line for Palestine. So it is a national mobilization all out to the Capitol, surround the Capitol. It is starting tomorrow, July 24th at 11 a.m. at Pennsylvania Avenue and 3rd Street in Washington, D.C. Wear red if you're going to be showing up. You can actually register. We do have the links down below for you to register to get transportation to get yourself to DC. So you could get involved there. There's a number of other protests that are happening as well. Jill Stein tweeted this one out. Netanyahu has no business in Congress. He belongs in The Hague. We need to arrest the bastard. Jill Stein, the only Jewish candidate for president, is also the only pro-Palestinian candidate for president. So isn't that something? Isn't that odd? I mean, what in the world is going on to where you got Kennedy and Trump and Biden and Harris? It's a little unclear where Harris stands, but here's Jill Stein standing up so strongly on behalf of I would say on behalf of both the Jewish and the Palestinian people. Because if you are Jewish, what's happening right now is such an affront against the Jewish people. Israel's behavior is causing anti-Semitism. It is causing people to view the Jewish people and the Zionist movement in an obviously very negative light. And so this is, being pro-Palestine is not just being pro-Palestinian, it's also being pro-Jew. You don't want to tarnish the goodwill and the name and the reputation of the Jewish people by attaching them to Israel as if it's one and the same. And that is, Jill Stein, I think, she's a very, very brave woman. But she's also saying, get out there and protest Netanyahu. Code Pink has also got a protest going on. They're saying, Netanyahu, you are not welcome in DC. They've got this arrest Netanyahu for war crimes against humanity. Join the People's Red Line and shut down DC July 24th. So they're also joining in. They're doing a noise rally at 8 a.m. across the water from the Watergate Hotel. They're then meeting for the rally at 10:30 a.m. in front of John Marshall Park on Pennsylvania Avenue, and 4th Street is their rally meetup point. You can also get on a bus to DC. They've got transportation from Code Pink. You could get on the bus from Albany, New York, Baltimore, Maryland. These all leave July 24th. The Albany one leaves at 12:30 in the morning. So if you're watching from Albany, New York, you're getting close to, you've got a couple of hours before you can get yourself to this bus stop and get yourself to DC. Baltimore, Maryland has a bus leaving at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Boston, Massachusetts is going to be, they've got a bus departing. Bronx, New York has got one leaving at 5:30 in the morning. Brooklyn at 6 in the morning. Charlotte, North Carolina, 5 in the morning. You could catch a bus. Chicago, Illinois, too late. The bus just left. Cincinnati, literally, the bus left 36 minutes ago. Cincinnati, Ohio, they got one leaving tonight at 10 p.m. You got just a little bit to get out there. Columbus, it's too late. They just left as well at 8 p.m. Indianapolis is leaving in an hour, or half an hour. So you got to get your stuff packed and go. New Hampshire is leaving also in a half an hour. There's buses going from New York. They got them all over the place, guys. But if you have the ability and you're mostly looks like the furthest west they go is Illinois. Otherwise, if you are east, consider getting on one of these buses, get out to DC and protest Netanyahu. We do not want to continue this war. Here's some of we got some video of Code Pink, some of their, do we have this? Let's go ahead and play this protest video from Code Pink.
Not a penny, not a dime. Not a penny, not a dime. No more money for Israel's crime. No more money for Israel's crime. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Netanyahu, you can't hide. Netanyahu, you can't hide. Gaza is a red line. Gaza is a red line. Netanyahu, you can't hide. Netanyahu, you can't hide. Gaza is a red line. Gaza is a red line.
Code Pink's founder, Medea Benjamin, we got a video of her as well.
So we're here outside the Watergate Hotel waiting for Netanyahu to come to Washington, D.C. This is where he's staying at the hotel right behind us. And we are out here to, quote, greet him. We're just so disgusted that the White House and Congress are going to be hosting him, shaking hands with him, taking photographs next to him, listening to him, at a time when the world community is calling for him to be arrested. So we represent the majority of people around the world who are saying, arrest the war.
Netanyahu, it is time. You're gonna pay for your crimes. You're gonna pay for your crimes. Netanyahu, can't you see? Netanyahu, can't you see? Genocide your legacy. Genocide your legacy. From the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free.
So these are the pre-protests that are going to be and the big ones are tomorrow. So hopefully you guys can make it out there. And again, there are links down below if you want to catch a bus and get yourself out there to help protest against Netanyahu and his speaking to Congress. Harris is not going to be there. So this, we just mentioned this, that Vice President Harris has declined to preside over the Senate chamber. She is going to be meeting apparently with him privately at some point. That has not been scheduled yet, but she's not going to be in that Senate chamber. She says that she's traveling. You know, right now she's in Wisconsin, so she's going to be traveling during that time and is not going to be there, but is planning on sitting down with him. There's some others who are going to be meeting with Netanyahu. Apparently, Joe Biden is going to be meeting with Netanyahu on Thursday. By the way, he's not dead. There were these crazy reports going around that Joe Biden he had died. That's why he hadn't made a public appearance, or he was in hospice care and he was going to die. He was seen walking around today looking fine, getting on an airplane, and he is set to meet with Netanyahu on Thursday. He's also going to be doing an address to the nation about him stepping aside as the Democratic nominee. But he is planning on meeting with him. Now, you know, some might say, well, why even meet with Biden? He's still president we don't know if he's going to be forced to step aside and have Harris take over for the remainder of his term. But at this point, he's still set to be president until January 20th. So that's a long time for him to be making decisions on what weapons they're going to be sending to Israel. So it's important for Netanyahu to meet with Biden and convince him that those weapons are important. And, you know, that's what he's going to be doing. He's also going to be meeting then, we know he's scheduled to have a meeting with Kamala Harris, or they're scheduled to schedule it, but they haven't actually scheduled it yet. He's also going to be meeting with Donald Trump. That has been confirmed. They kind of changed this meeting around a little bit. They at first said that he was going to meet on Wednesday. Then they changed it to Thursday. Now he's going to be going Friday to Mar-a-Lago and meeting with Donald Trump there. Trump did say, you know, one of the questions that people have is what would be the difference between Biden and Harris and Trump when it comes to their stances on Israel. We know what Biden has done. We've seen him as president with Israel, so we already know that. Harris is a little bit more of a wild card. We're not 100% certain what Harris would do. Many think Harris would actually be tougher on Israel than Joe Biden has been. And based on her statements, I tend to agree. She is set to reaffirm in her meeting with Netanyahu that the United States will support Israel and their right to self-defense. But she's also reported to tell him that that is with limitations based on how they're behaving towards the Palestinians, that she is very concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So I think she might actually be harder on Netanyahu than Joe Biden. And which is interesting, you know, Kamala. So then she's getting a lot of criticism. There's a lot of Zionists out there that are saying, oh, she's an anti-Semite. She's married to a Jew. You know, it's like, oh, you know, it's just, you know, the people, the way that the things that they say, how they connect these dots. They just can't argue on the merits. You know, it's just got to always devolve into, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite, you're a sexist, you know, it's just always into this. But what does Trump say? He says, during my first term, we had peace and stability in the region, even signing the historic Abraham Accords, and we will have it again. Just as I have said in discussions with President Zelensky and other world leaders in recent weeks, my peace through strength agenda will demonstrate to the world that these horrible, deadly wars and violent conflicts must end. Millions are dying, and Kamala Harris is in no way capable of stopping it. I don't know what Trump is. I mean, we've seen what Trump did while he was president. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was a big slap in the face to the Palestinians. He then did these Abraham Accords, which did not include any discussions with Palestinians. It was with the other Arab nations around. And the Abraham Accords basically turned the Palestinian people into Native Americans. It gave them reservations inside of the West Bank, and that was it. The rest of it would go to Israel. And it would literally turn them into Native Americans without the same rights that our Native Americans have. So we've already seen what he's going to do. Not sure if he would continue going down that path. It's still a wild card because Trump really does not like war, and I don't think he would want to have his name attached to a genocide going on in Gaza. I think he would want to put an end to it. How he gets to that end, I do think that Trump probably would say, look, you guys have to have a hostage agreement and you have to have a ceasefire, and that's what you just have to do. I tend to think he would do that, but again, he's a wild card. We don't really know. One thing we do know is that when it comes to Kamala Harris, we know that she will continue the war in Ukraine. So I guess one has to sit here and ask themselves, if let's say Kamala Harris would end the war in Israel, she would stop supporting Israel, like many of the Zionists are worried about, but she'll continue arming Ukraine. Trump, on the other hand, will end the war in Ukraine, but maybe continue arming Israel. So which would you rather have? Would you rather allow Israel to continue their war, but end the war between Ukraine and Russia? Or would you rather continue the war between Ukraine and Russia and end the war in Gaza? I'm interested to hear from you. You could email me on that one, kim@kimiverson.com. I'll probably also put a poll out on my Twitter account just to see what people think, which one they would, if it was that. You know, I know that there's these other wild card scenarios that could happen, and maybe Trump would end both wars, or maybe Kamala would end both wars. But let's just say they wouldn't. And one would just continue supporting Israel and the other one would continue supporting Ukraine. Which one would you rather have? Really curious to hear from you on that one. Hey guys, this was just a clip of a longer show. Catch the full show by going to KimIversonShow.com. It is free. It airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You could go back now and watch this full interview. I highly recommend it. Again, go to KimIversonShow.com. Thank you so much for watching.